Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Darian and today we're going to be talking about all the books I read in May. So May was not the best reading month for me. I only finished 5 books, which I know is not bad, but I was really hoping to read a lot more since it was my first full month of freedom since finishing school, but I'm already having a better reading month in June. So that's good. But today we're talking about May. I'm happy to be back doing these like monthly wrap-ups instead of wrapping up like 3 months worth of books. But since there's only 5 books to talk about today, this probably won't be a super long video. So I'm also feeling very low energy today, so hopefully you guys can cozy up, grab a drink. I have my emotional support coffee with my super long straw because all my other ones are dirty. So before we get into the books, let's go through some stats like I did back in my January wrap up. So like I said, the month of May, I read 5 books for a total of 2,236 pages, and I listened to a total of 6.5 hours because I only listened to one audiobook and it was quite short, and I did reread 1 book. In terms of genres, I read 2 fantasy books, 1 historical book, 1 mystery, and 1 nonfiction. For the format, all 5 of the books I read were novels. I mean, I know the nonfiction is not a novel, but there's no nonfiction option for format, but they weren't like novellas, graphic novels, whatever. 2 of the authors were new to me and 3 of the authors I had read from before. In terms of my ratings, I gave 3 books 3.5 stars, 1 book 4 stars, and 1 book 5 stars. Like I said, I only read 1 audiobook, I read 1 ebook, and 3 physical books. 3 of the books were part of a series and 2 of them were standalones. And then I read 1 adult book, 1 new adult, and 3 YA books. And then in terms of the year that they were published, this is interesting. I read 1 from 2023, 2 from 2020, 1 from 2016, and 1 from 2017. And then, like I said, 4 of them were fiction, 1 of them was nonfiction. And I think those are the main stats that we can talk about. So like I did with my January wrap up, I'm gonna organize this and go from my least favorite book to my favorite book of the month. Now, since none of the books got lower than a 3.5 rating, there's no books that I actively disliked this month. So my least favorite book, I still enjoyed it, but that was Why We Swim by Bonnie Choi. I believe that's how you pronounce her name. This is the nonfiction book I read in May, and I kind of picked this book up just on a whim. I saw it on Everand, and most of you probably don't know this because I don't know if I've talked about it. I used to be a competitive swimmer. I loved swimming when I was younger, and then I did it competitively for a few years. I had dreams of going to the Olympics. Like, I loved swimming, and then I had a horrible coach one year that basically ruined swimming for me, and I have not really swam since then, so that's kind of sad. This book just intrigued me. It's basically about swimming and why we as humans swim, and it explored swimming through different cultures throughout history, some famous swimmers, and also like animals who swim, and it's just about swimming in general. And I thought it was very interesting, but there were definitely, like, this is the audiobook I listened to, and there were points in the audiobook where it was very easy to zone out because like we'd be talking about famous swimmers who had certain disabilities and you know, overcame adversity, and then there'd be a chapter about salmon and I was like, that's great for salmon, but I don't know. Like, I was definitely more interested in some aspects of the book over others, so I gave it 3.5 stars. I mean, I think it was well written, and it definitely like kind of fueled my love for swimming, and I have been like toying with the idea of getting back into it, not like competitively because I think those days are done, but just as a form of exercise. Like, this book really made me want to swim again, and I'm really grateful for it for that. So I definitely enjoyed this book. It just wasn't like my favorite nonfiction book I've ever read, but if you like swimming, I would definitely check it out. Yeah, it's a very short audiobook, so why not? I just found some parts of it way more interesting than other parts. So my next 3.5 star read is the only physical book I have here with me, but that is is The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I've been interested in this for so long. I planned to read it for the Magical Readathon in April because I had a prompt that was read a book with game or play in the title, I think. And I was like, oh, what a perfect opportunity to read this book, and then I didn't get to it in April, so I read it in May. And this was just such a fun time. Like, it was so silly goofy. I've heard a lot of people compare this to Knives Out, and it's definitely like Knives Out but like with less murder. But it's about this girl named, I want to say Kylie? Avery. But someone's named Kylie in this book, right? I don't know, but Avery. So Avery is just your average girl. She lives with her sister and she's trying to make ends meet. She's trying to save up money to work towards a better life for herself and for her sister. And then one day she finds out that this billionaire who recently passed away left his inheritance to her, even though she's never met this person. She has no idea who he is. So this guy's family is pretty upset because they expected to get his inheritance and instead he gives it to this random girl. So in order to get her inheritance, she has to spend a year living in the, what is it called? Yeah, she has to live in Hawthorne House. That's what it is. And so she moves into this house where like most of the people don't like her because they think that she must have like done something to manipulate the grandfather for him to give her his inheritance. And of course there's 4 grandsons who live in this house, and 2 of them fall in love with Avery because she's a girl and she's right there. And it's just like, is it the best thing I've ever read? No. But it was just so much fun. Like, this book was kind of addicting. It was very easy to read. Like, every time I picked it up I would just get sucked into the story, and I had a lot of fun with it, and I definitely want to continue this series. Like, it's not the most like well-written characters ever. It's definitely very cheesy and corny sometimes, but I just had such a fun time reading it. I love books that include like a mystery and puzzles, and the grandfather left Avery a bunch of puzzles to solve in order to get the inheritance, and I just thought it was so much fun. Like, I had a great time reading this. I loved figuring everything out with Avery. I loved seeing the angst with the different grandsons. I just thought it was really fun. So yeah, this was 3.5 stars and I am excited to continue with the series. And then the last 3.5 star book I read, which honestly is probably more like a 3.75 because I liked it a little bit more than these other 2 books, but that was A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J Maas. I finally continued this series. I read the first book in 2020 or 2021? I don't even remember. I just remember it was like the last book I read the year I read it. I read it a long time ago, and at the time I gave it 3.5 stars, but like, this book to me is so much better than the first one, so I would probably lower the rating of the first one, but this still felt like a 3.5, 3.75 book to me. Everyone knows this series. You're following Feyre, who is a human, and in the first book she kills a wolf. She is out hunting to get food for her family. She kills a wolf who turns out to actually be a fairy, and to pay for her crimes she is brought to the Fey court or whatever and has to live there, which is like, but she's really well taken care of. So I always thought that was weird, like, to pay for your crime we're gonna take care of you in this big mansion. Like, I don't know. So anyways, so that's the first book, and then this book follows basically right after the end of the last book, and Feyre is dealing with a lot of trauma because there was a lot that happened to her at the end of the last book, and a lot of this book is her dealing with her trauma, her PTSD. And one thing I think Sarah J Maas does well is write about mental health. I find in every series that I've read from her, her characters go through so much and she doesn't forget to include these characters processing their emotions and what they went through. And you see a lot more of Rhysand in this book than you did in the first book, and he is also dealing with a lot of trauma and PTSD, and it's kind of about him and Feyre dealing with their trauma together, you know, trauma bonding. And I thought it was well written in terms of that. I don't think Sarah J Maas is very good at her world building. There was so much in this book and I was like, where are we? Like, what is happening? I find it silly that and some of them are named after the seasons, but some of them are named after the time of day. Like, I don't really get it. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I don't think she excels at her world building. And obviously there are some plot points that I find a little silly, and like some of the language, like I cannot get over the whole mate thing. It's a little too much for me, but I did think this was a huge improvement over the first book, and I thought the plot was way more interesting than the first book. And this was an over 600-page book, and I read it quite fast because I was really interested in what was going on with these characters. I enjoyed it. I mean, this is definitely my least favorite series from her, but it was fun. It was fun to read. Sometimes you gotta read some fairy smut, you know? 3.75 seems pretty fair to me. And also, I hate Tamlin. I know that's a very popular opinion, and when I read the first book, like, he's fine in that book, but I knew he would get worse, and he got worse. Like, he got a lot worse. And also, everyone tells me this is the best book in the series, so it doesn't really make me want to pick up the third book, but I will eventually. Probably not anytime soon, honestly, but I'm happy I finally read this because it's been on my Kindle for so long, and I finally picked it up. And yeah, so I read it. I read Akamath. I'm proud of myself. But yeah, that's all I have to say about it. So the 4-star book I read this month was Only This Beautiful Moment by Abdi Nazemian. Abdi Nazemian is one of my favorite authors. One of my favorite books of all time is The Channer Legacies by him. I also loved Like a Love Story by him, and so I was very excited to read his newest release. It's definitely my least favorite of his books, but I still gave it 4 stars. I shared a lot of my thoughts about this book in the video I did where I tried to read 100 pages every day. I talked a lot about that book in that video, but this book, you're basically following 3 different characters who are all part of the same family. So you're following, I'm trying to remember the names. I know Mood is the youngest, and he's like the present day timeline, and he lives in America, but he travels to Iran because his grandfather is dying, and so he wants to spend some time with his grandfather before he passes away. And then you follow his dad, I think his name is Saeed, when he was 17 years old in the, I want to say 70s, when he's living in Iran and then has to move to America. And then you're following the grandfather named Bobby in, I think, the 20s or the 30s when he was 17, living in America, and then eventually traveling to Iran. And you're following these 3 generations of men all at the age of 17 and how their lives intersect, aside from being related obviously, but just the similar things they go through even though the 3 of them are very different people. This book explores sexuality because Mood is gay, and his father, he's out to his father, and he feels like his dad respects the fact that he's gay, but he doesn't like to talk about it. So Mood always feels uncomfortable talking about his boyfriend with his dad just because he feels like maybe he doesn't respect it even though outwardly he does. And then we find out that the grandfather is gay. The main thing that I loved about this book is it really delved into the topic of empathy, because when you first meet Mood's father, like, your initial reaction is to be like, well, he should be more accepting of his son. And then you find out through his perspective when he was 17 what his life was like and why he is the way he is, and it just makes you have more understanding for the people around you and why they might do certain things, and like people who have different opinions, why they might have those opinions. And I thought it was just a beautiful look at humanity and empathy, and just like the fact that you never know what someone is going through, you never know someone's past and what kind of trauma they've experienced and how that has shaped them into the people they are today. And so this book made me think a lot, and I really appreciated it for that reason. The only reason this was a 4-star, not a 5, is I thought the writing was a little weaker than his other books. I'm not sure why. It just wasn't up to par in my mind with his level of writing in his other books. Not to say it was written badly or anything, because I still think he's a very skilled writer, and like maybe if this was the first book I read from him I would have felt differently, but because I know he's such a good writer, this one, it just didn't feel like the writing was as good, but I still loved it, and I would highly recommend this book because it's very underrated. I don't know anyone else who has read this book, and I think honestly, like, I feel like this book made me a better person. I just really, really loved it, and I highly recommend it. Okay, I have one more book to talk about. This was my 1 5-star of the month and also my 1 reread of the month, and I think we all know what book it is. Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I mean, it's no surprise this was 5 stars. It is my favorite book of all time. In case you don't know, I don't know how you wouldn't know that at this point, but oh my god, I love this book so much. I haven't reread it since 2021, so it's been a few years, so I was nervous going into it that maybe I wouldn't like it as much anymore, but no, it's still my favorite book of all time. I replaced all the tabs that were in it. I don't think you can see that because I had ugly tabs in it before. I replaced them all with my see-through tabs. I also annotated. I just had such a great time rereading this book, and I filmed a whole vlog of my experience rereading this book, and it is spoiler filled. So if you love this book as much as I do, I highly recommend you go check that video out because I give all my spoilery thoughts on this book. But if you don't know, this book follows Laszlo Strange, who is a librarian, and as long as he could remember, he has been obsessed with this lost city of Weep. Weep is now considered a myth because many years ago the true name of Weep was plucked from the minds of everyone, so no one can remember the true name of Weep, and it slowly started to be forgotten, and so everyone just considers it a myth of a city. But Laszlo has always believed that it is real, and it has been his dream to visit there one day, and then he gets the opportunity to travel to Weep. And that's all I ever want to say. I find this book is best going into it knowing as little as possible because I love the way this book is written and how Laini Taylor plots this story, and how you don't even truly know what's really going on until close to halfway through the book. Like, there's a lot of setup at the beginning for Laszlo, who he is, why he's obsessed with this city, and just following his journey traveling there and then finding out like what's really going on. You meet other characters. I just think it's such a beautiful story. I love it so much. Like, I don't see any book ever beating this for me as my favorite book, and I kind of hope nothing ever does because like I have the moth tattoo, and I feel like it would be embarrassing to be like, oh yeah, that's my second favorite book. Like I don't know. So I am just so happy to have read this again. I love Laszlo. I love Sarai. This is another book where I feel like it teaches you about empathy and, you know, understanding different people's circumstances. Obviously this is in a fantasy setting, but I think it still has a lot of themes that you can apply to our real lives, and I just love it. And I really hope I can reread Muse of Nightmare soon because I've only ever read that book once, so I really want to reread it soon. But yeah, so this was my favorite book of the month. Obviously it's my favorite book ever, and if you want to check out that video, go check it out because I spoiled the whole book. Don't watch it if you haven't read it though. Go read this and then check it out. Okay, so those are the 5 books that I read in May. Let me know if you've read any of these books or what your favorite book that you read in May is. If you watch till the end, leave the blue heart emoji just for Strange the Dreamer. I feel like I already said that in another video, but whatever. Leave the blue heart or any blue emoji. Let's say any blue emoji because of Strange the Dreamer. And yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon with another video soon. Bye!